Kol Ama, all its nation. Hainu Neshamos Asher B'Kirba, that is to say, the souls that are in it, B'Soda'i Bur V'Gam Biyah, in the secret of the pregnancy, inside of Malchus, or also in the concept of in the lower worlds of Bri Yitzir and Asiyah, Mevakshim Lechem, they're asking for bread. Kol Ama Mevakshim Lechem Hainu Surah Hanishpas Milamayla, that is to say, the divine flow that comes from above. Shibiyos and Ibur Ochil Mamashi Murcheles, that when they're in a state of pregnancy, they eat what the mother eats. Look what's brought in the idea in the end of the Tanya, where it says that he and his causations are one. Which is not the case now in exile. She doesn't have as much flow, so they're asking for bread. The neshamos that are in the Ibur or in the lower worlds are all asking for sustenance, and because there's not enough hashpa from above. Nasnu kol machamadehem, they gave all their precious things. Shayirotzim lashpia lamata, that they wanted to give down flow below. Mishum yosim emashegel rotzachulu, because more than what the calf wants to nurse, the cow wants to give them a nurturance. So all the precious things from above were given. Or because when you give the most precious thing to below, so that awakens an extra light from above, because the precious thing from down to the lowest thing, you connect the end to the beginning. So now they've abandoned this, and each one is returned to connect each one to its source, in order to they have enough sustenance, to at least have enough divine flow to keep themselves going. So they gave all their precious things to just keep themselves going, so they're not getting this extra divine flow, rather they're just getting what's necessary. And that's what it means. I was someone who ate too much. That's the idea of somebody who does things only for themselves. Give me. Gluttonous. I was gluttonous. And that's why the dirt from the desert, you cannot cover the blood of an animal, because you cannot grow from it. So it cannot be selfish. You cannot have this selfishness and not just take for yourself. You have to use because the concept of the attribute of holiness is to give flow, and the concept of the dirt in the desert doesn't give anything, it doesn't grow anything, therefore you can't use it in kedusha. And look what's brought in another place, explaining the idea to satiate each living thing with divine will. The concept of sustaining, which is the opposite of desire. That is through the masculine flow. The sweetness, the strictnesses of the feminine. And they also become like the nature of kindness is to give flow. So there must be l'chol chai ratzon. Like it's brought in Zohar that she seeds and gives birth to a male from the day she becomes pregnant and so forth. So she's going to become the giver, that when she becomes pregnant, she's going to become the state of the giver. She's going to give the flow of giving birth is the concept of masculine flow to a certain degree. I guess. Which is not the case in exile, so she's not giving the flow downwards, rather she's taking. He's like a glutton. The concept of strictness is that all eyes are looking towards you. And they still don't have their bread, they still don't have their food. You could say, like it's brought in Zohar about the verse, like a shiram that is thirsty, that she's crying out for the lack of pleasure. And that's the meaning to say that she's crying out. Tarog is a kind of crying out for lack of pleasure. You could also cry out for lack of sustenance, not just pleasure, but even sustenance, like the ox that cries out, al blilo, on its mixture of grains and so forth. And the Rebbe says on the bottom, hey. So to above, the concept of bread is the flow, that you have the regular flow and then you have the extra flow. So shorish is the regular flow, the fundamental root flow. Please, that you can't live without. Like the idea of that it's a statute to Israel, that like the verse that you should tear off for me the bread of my set bread, the one that's going to keep me alive. The Rebbe says on the bottom, and there's also the idea of an extra revelation of pleasure, a light of pleasure to the souls. It's in addition to the necessary fundamental. Like the idea that the Holy One, blessed be He, comes to play with the souls of the tzaddikim in Gan Eden. It's not just for satiation, but for play, for pleasure. And exile, there was such hunger, from the lack of divine flow, to the point where they did not even get bread. Therefore they gave all of their desired, their precious things. That is to say, all those, that extra light, that pleasure, they were willing to forgo it all. Like just to get the sustaining. And below, this would be an example of this would be precious stones and pearls, which are only for pleasure, in order to just receive sustenance. Where you could say a garment and a house are encompassing lights, and they do not have the nurturance to the external forces so much. They're called makifim. Which is not the case with an inner light like bread. There's a residue. There's bad stuff that comes from it. That's why he wanted specifically bread to get the orpnimi. That's why they gave all their precious things, the makifim, in order to get the bread, to give it unika to that there should be a psolis. Leftover magam ki achokma shi bechinas Hatorah mazon v'lechem tichya b'aleha, and also because the idea of chokma, of wisdom, which is the Torah, which is sustenance and bread, tichya b'aleha, she'll enliven her partner, ha-mitzvos makifim, which are the mitzvos that encompass k'moshe kasu b'makom acher. So you have the concept. It's not so clear. So again, so the Torah is the mazon, so he's asking for the mazon, that's the main thing, whereas the mitzvahs are the makifim, like the house and the garment. So if you don't have the base of mikdash anymore, at least you have bread. You're asking for bread to sustain you. If you don't have the Torah, you need at least the Torah. If you don't have the mitzvahs of the korbanos and so forth, at least you can keep the Torah. You have Nevi'im and so forth. And the Rebbe says on the bottom, so they're still just asking for the pnimius and not the makifim, the machmadehem.